Dr. McCarthy, I hear you've been doing some very interesting research on diabetes, obesity, and genetics. Can you tell me more?
Yes, my group's interested in identifying the genetic variants that predispose to type 2 diabetes and obesity, and then to use that information to develop insights into the biology of this disease, which remains pretty mysterious, and hopefully in time to use that information to give us better ways of preventing and treating the disease.
Right. And how does big data fit into this?
Well, certainly the genetic effects are relatively small individually. So on one level, we've had to accumulate very large data sets in order to find the genetic variants that are predisposing at a sufficiently significant level. So typically the studies that we do are now in hundreds of thousands of individuals, both genotyping and sequencing studies. But also at another level, as we try and understand the biology that comes with those genetic variants, we're having to overlay that with a great deal of additional biological information from genomic studies in pancreatic islets, for example, and other tissues that we think are relevant.
Right.
And as we move forward to translation, we're going to have to combine all of that genetic data with omics data and information on the environment and individual lifestyle to get a complete package, a complete understanding of where an individual is on their trajectory towards diabetes and what interventions may be appropriate.
And where does all this data come from?
We've really been involved in a lot of large global consortia, so many groups have individually worked on their own cohorts to develop an understanding of the genetic variation that contributes in those, but where we've been able to leverage additional power is by combining all of those data. So increasingly we look at populations from Europe, from the States, from Asia, from Africa increasingly, because we want to understand a global disease. We want to understand whether the genetic variants and whether the pathways involved are similar or different between major ethnic groups.
Right. And now that we've talked a little bit about the science part of the research, I'm curious in the practical applications. How will this actually translate to helping patients?
It's already starting to help in a small way. There are a subset of individuals who have type 2 diabetes clinically, but in whom there is a greater genetic effect. And this sometimes goes with an earlier onset and a stronger family history. And we've already been able to use some of the genetics that we know about to help identify those individuals a little bit more precisely, a little bit earlier, a little bit more definitively, and put them on the right treatment a little earlier than would otherwise have happened. There are many patients with these monogenic forms of diabetes that are actually missed in current clinical pipelines.
And earlier you mentioned monogenic diabetes. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, there are, as with many of the common diseases, there are a subset of individuals who seem to have more pronounced mutations in some of the genes that are involved, and that can lead to a much more familial, early onset form of these diseases. That's true of diabetes, it's true of obesity, it's true of many neurological conditions. And those have proven to be a little bit more tractable from the point of view of understanding what those genetic variants are. And because their impact is quite big, it's also easier to have a more dramatic effect on the individual journey through their disease in terms of treatment and prevention. So that's certainly been an area where there's been quite a lot of success in diabetes over the last 20 years, really. But it still only accounts for probably a few percent of the people that have type 2 diabetes or diabetes on the planet. So it's certainly very helpful in those individuals, but it isn't really yet addressing the major impact of diabetes.
Well, this has been very informative, and I know you're coming to visit us all the way from the UK, so how has your trip been so far?
It's always a pleasure to come to Stanford.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.